In the world of global finance, there are scandals. And then there is Wirecard, the story of a company that rose from the fringes of the internet to become a $24 billion tech darling, only to collapse into nothing when the world discovered that $2 billion money the company swore existed wasn't just missing. It was imaginary, fabricated, a ghost in the system. This is the unbelievable rise and catastrophic fall of Wirecard, the $2 billion German Mirage. To understand how this illusion was created, we need to travel back to the early 2000s. Back when the internet was messy, chaotic, and unregulated. A place where online gambling, adult entertainment, and shady merchants flourished. Traditional banks refused to process payments for these industries. They considered them too risky, too dirty, too unpredictable. And that's precisely where Wirecard found its opening. A small group of technologists realized there was a fortune to be made by processing payments nobody else wanted to touch. Wirecard stepped in, offering to move money for merchants living on the edges of the digital frontier. They didn't ask too many questions. They didn't worry about reputation. If a site needed payment processing, Wirecard was there to help for a price. At first, the business model worked. Wirecard grew quickly. But it also inherited the murky habits of the industries it served: opaque transactions, offshore partners, and a tolerance for questionable practices. And as the company evolved, it never fully shed that DNA. By the mid-2000s, Wirecard decided to reinvent itself. It wanted to be legitimate, respectable, even visionary. It listed on the stock exchange, claimed to be a leader in digital payments, and aggressively marketed itself as Europe's answer to PayPal and Stripe. But behind the polished press releases, there were warning signs. Numbers that didn't quite make sense. Revenues that grew impossibly fast. Margins far higher than any competitor in the industry. But no one cared. Europe desperately wanted a homegrown tech champion. Germany wanted a national success story. Investors wanted the next big Fintech rocket, and Wirecard was more than happy to play that role. Enter Markus Braun, the soft-spoken Austrian CEO with a love for black turtlenecks, futuristic language, and philosophical speeches about the future of money. Braun positioned himself as a tech prophet, someone who could see where the digital economy was heading. He spoke about artificial intelligence, the cashless future, and global payment networks with absolute confidence. And the markets loved him. But every great fraud has an architect hiding in the shadows. Wirecard had Jan Marsalek ***. If Braun was the face of Wirecard, Marsalek was the engine. Charismatic, mysterious, and uncomfortably well-connected, Marsalek operated like a character pulled from a spy thriller. He traveled with armed security, bragged about having access to classified military documents, claimed ties to intelligence agencies, and maintained relationships with shadowy figures around the world. Executives inside Wirecard feared him. Employees whispered about him. Investors didn't know what to make of him. But one thing was clear. Wherever Marsalek went, Wirecard's strange, unexplained profits seemed to follow. By the early 2010 seconds, Wirecard was growing at a pace that defied common sense. The company claimed it was expanding rapidly across Asia and the Middle East, working with third-party partners who supposedly processed millions of transactions on Wirecard's behalf. These partners were the backbone of Wirecard's explosive growth. But there was one problem. Almost none of them were real. The transactions were fake. The profits were fake. The money never existed. Wirecard was building a financial empire on numbers typed into spreadsheets, numbers that were never checked, never verified, and never questioned. Why? Because Wirecard was a national treasure, a symbol of German innovation, a tech unicorn in a country desperate for them. Politicians championed the company. Banks poured billions into it. Analysts recommended its stock enthusiastically. And in 2018, the ultimate symbol of success arrived. Wirecard joined the DAX 30, Germany's top-tier stock index, the Financial Hall of Fame. Wirecard even replaced Commerzbank, one of Germany's oldest institutions. It was a symbolic passing of the torch from old-world banking to the new digital era. But the celebration was built on lies. The Financial Times, led by journalist Dan McCrum, was one of the few voices raising questions. McCrum dug through regulatory filings, interviewed former employees, and exposed patterns that pointed unmistakably toward fraud. But instead of thanking him, Wirecard went to war. The company hired private investigators to spy on journalists. They intimidated whistleblowers. They launched lawsuits, orchestrated smear campaigns, and even attempted to plant fake evidence to discredit reporters. Wirecard wanted to send a message. We are powerful. We are protected. Stay away. And for a long time, the strategy worked. Regulators took Wirecard's side. BaFin, Germany's financial watchdog, didn't investigate Wirecard. Instead, they investigated the journalists exposing it. Think about that. The fraudsters were defended. The truth-tellers were threatened. Wirecard's stock soared even higher. Investors convinced themselves everything was fine. People wanted the story of a European tech giant to be true, even when the evidence suggested otherwise. But fraud is like gravity. Eventually, it pulls everything down. In 2019, auditors at Ernst & Young finally demanded something simple. Show us the money. Wirecard claimed that nearly 2 billion euros were safely stored in 2 banks in the Philippines. So auditors asked the banks for confirmation. What happened next belongs in a movie. The banks replied with confusion. They said the documents Wirecard provided were not just inaccurate, they were forged. The signatures were fake. The confirmations were fake. The accounts didn't exist. Wirecard wasn't missing money. It had never had the money in the first place. The announcement detonated like a bomb. Wirecard stock didn't fall gradually, it entered free fall. In a single week, the company lost more than 90% of its value. Tens of billions evaporated. Employees lost their jobs. Investors lost life savings. Banks scrambled to explain why they had trusted a company built on fiction. Markus Braun resigned within hours. Days later, he was arrested. But the biggest twist was the disappearance of Jan Marsalek. Before police could question him, Marsalek slipped out of Germany, traveling to Austria, then Belarus, and finally vanishing into Russia. He has not been seen since. Today, intelligence agencies believe he is living under the protection of the Russian state, a corporate executive turned international fugitive. The collapse of Wirecard was more than a scandal, it was a national embarrassment. German regulators were accused of incompetence, arrogance, and outright failure. The government had defended Wirecard publicly, dismissing concerns as foreign attacks meant to harm Germany's reputation. Meanwhile, ordinary investors were left devastated. Pension funds, retirement accounts, and small investors who believed Wirecard was the future lost everything. Even more disturbing were the real-world impacts. In some countries, Wirecard provided payment systems for government services. When the company collapsed, thousands of people couldn't access funds temporarily. Businesses relying on Wirecard's infrastructure were stranded. It wasn't just a financial crime, it was a global disruption. But the question remains, asterisk, asterisk, how did this fraud survive for so long? Asterisk, asterisk. First, Wirecard exploited the complexity of payment processing. Offshore partners, complicated flows of digital money, technical terms that few regulators fully understood. Wirecard used the language of innovation to hide the truth. Second, the company exploited national pride. Germany wanted a tech giant. Wirecard played that role perfectly. Third, intimidation worked. Journalists and critics were targeted aggressively. Fear kept people quiet. Fourth, regulators failed. BaFin protected Wirecard and attacked its critics. The very people meant to guard the financial system helped shield the fraud. And finally, ambition blinded people. Everyone wanted to believe they had discovered the next global fintech titan. But the most fascinating part of this entire saga is how simple the fraud really was. No sophisticated algorithms, no advanced schemes, no groundbreaking deception. Wirecard didn't steal money. It invented money. It fabricated revenue. It forged documents. It created a fictional world of profits that existed only on spreadsheets. It was the oldest scam in the book. Make up numbers and hope no one checks. The story of Wirecard is a lesson in the vulnerability of modern finance. It shows that even in an age of high-tech tools, advanced auditing systems, and global regulations, fraud can still thrive when trust replaces verification. Today, the legacy of Wirecard continues to unfold. Markus Braun is fighting charges in court. Dozens of executives face investigations. Germany is overhauling its regulatory systems. Auditing firms are being scrutinized for failures. And Jan Marsalek remains a ghost, one of the world's most wanted fugitives. Wirecard will be remembered as one of the greatest financial scandals in European history, a corporate collapse as dramatic and shocking as Enron, a story of ambition, deception, incompetence, and illusion. But most importantly, Wirecard is a warning that fraud thrives when people want to believe, A warning that innovation can be faked. A warning that confidence can mask corruption. A warning that even the biggest companies can crumble overnight. Wirecard wasn't just a financial failure. It was a mirage, an engineered fantasy that fooled investors, regulators, governments, and the entire global financial system. Because sometimes, the most dangerous lies aren't hidden in the shadows. They're told in boardrooms, written in quarterly earnings reports, and spoken by executives wearing impeccable suits. Wirecard was not a tech revolution. It was not a pioneer. It was not the future of payments. It was a carefully crafted illusion. A $2 billion fiction that collapsed the moment the world finally asked, "Where is the money?" And when the truth came out, there was nothing left but smoke.